You're listening to RealAgriculture.com. Get real, get connected.
Bernard Tobin here for RealAgriculture.com. It is mid-November, but today we're going to talk about January and the Southwest Ag Conference. It'll be upon us before we know it. And to join us and talk about that today, Peter Johnson, one of the masterminds of this here conference.
How are you today, Bernard? Thanks very much for having me.
Hey, Peter. Southwest Ag is always a great time, right after Christmas. I always thought one of the best conferences of the year. Lots of, insights, lots of, technical insights, lots of great speakers. This year, you've got a theme, rising up to the challenges. Tell us about that, where it comes from.
So, we really think the Southwest Ag Conference is the premier agricultural conference in the Great Lakes Basin, and I'm incredibly excited about this particular agenda program because there's a ton of great speakers rising up to the challenges. So, we're into this scenario where technology is moving so fast and it's so hard to know where do I make the money, where don't I make the money. Plus the weather patterns seem to be getting more and more variable. We get into these massive rainstorms where we get 7 inches of rain. How does that impact on cropping? And it really does impact on cropping. So how do we know what happens, and then how do we manage so that we don't give up yield and profitability? So there's all these challenges out there. The other big challenge, as always, is marketing, and that don't ask me how to market, Bernard. I'm a terrible marketer, but in any case, all those challenges, and we try to bring the latest information and the best possible brains, knowledge, minds in the country to address those challenges and help farmers do a better job.
Now let's talk about some of those great minds you're having. Dr. David Cole, billed as the road warrior. He goes a lot of places, sees a lot of things, so we're going to hear a lot of future trends and what to look for in the new year from him?
Yeah, absolutely. So David is a demographics specialist, and you would say, well, why are we having him? Well, our feature speakers, we really have our feature speakers to give growers a break from the technology. If you spend 4 hours in the morning at technical sessions, you really almost get brain dead. You need a break. So we bring in these other guys. So here we have a demographics specialist who's really going to talk to us about, so how are the populations shifting, and how does that shift impact on you as a grower in the farm? So a lot more Spanish, for example, coming into the U.S. Does that have an implication? A lot more Asian people coming into the western part of Canada. Does that have an implication? The aging population, how does that have an implication? All those various things, and we don't often think on that forest kind of scale. We're really focused in on how do I grow that best corn acre. So that's like a tree. But David's going to look at the whole forest and say, hey guys, here's some things you need to be aware of, and this is going to help you down the road.
Right. You've got the tornado hunter, Greg Johnson, coming from Regina. I suspect he's going to chase a tornado all the way down to Ontario.
Yeah, he is just a hoot of a guy, just a wild man up in front of the audience, and he really is going to challenge people to be the best they can be. And he is a bit of a whirlwind himself, but his focus, he will talk about these weather shifts that I've talked about and the violent weather that we're getting into and why that's happening. But he'll also show how you really need to just grab onto your dream, whatever that dream is, and be the best that you can be. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. You can do it, and just have that drive and that passion and that enthusiasm. And I'm sure when you walk out of that session, you will just be absolutely pumped. That's what we want, because you're going to go back into technical sessions and learn some more. So you got to be ready to do that.
You got a big lineup of folks who are going to be talking about research and things to look for in the new year. You are going to be in a battle royal yourself, right? With Pat Lynch and the Production Pundits.
Yeah, absolutely. Production Pundits is a great session. If you can get to it, it's at the end of the day, so it's sort of where people are a little bit just ready to back off and have a little more entertainment, but also still have some questions. Maybe some questions that came out of the sessions that they've heard that particular day. So bring your questions. Pat is always wrong. Let's start right there. The only time he's right is when he agrees with me, and then I wonder if I'm wrong because he's wrong so much. In any any case, it's a blast. We banter back and forth, and it's questions from the audience. Love to see you there and love to answer your questions.
Talk about you. I'm also looking through the agenda here. A tillage options Donnybrook.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a real bust-up.
Absolutely. So I love this concept. We have a moldboard plow guy. And by the way, what I really like about this, Bernard, is that they're all young guys. These are all the up-and-coming farmers. It's not the 60-year-old guy that moldboard plowed for his entire life or has been no-till for 30 years. These are young, keen guys. So we have a moldboard plow individual in Roger Burma, and Roger's dad was actually a hardcore no-tiller, and Roger's going back to the plow, so this is really intriguing, and so he's going to tell you why the plow is the best. And then we have Tyler Valmerhausen, who's going to talk about strip tillage and reduced tillage, and Eric Dietrich that comes in kind of in the middle with conservation tillage. Keen young minds that are out there trying different things, and it's a Donnybrook. It's a free-for-all. It's let's have at it, and you walk out of that session hopefully deciding which one works on your farm.
Right. Now, you've got people like Dave Hooker is going to talk about maximizing corn yield. You've got Greg Stewart in the hot corner. Talk about some of the other folks on the agenda who, are top of mind for you and who you're thinking will be really interesting.
Yeah, so there's so many really interesting ones. I can't do it in the time allotted, but let me tell you that Dr. Shannon Osborne is coming up, and that's a really exciting session in my opinion, and that's because she is going to tell us how to improve our soils and the impact of removing residue. So there's lots of talk, and there's been some field days about baling corn stover and cellulosic ethanol and all those things. And we talk lots about cover crops and can cover crops build the soil. And for years, I've watched when I do organic matters in the field compared to in the bush, and boy, we have just really mined the soil over the last number of years. So now in comes Dr. Osborne, and she's going to tell us, number one, we can stop mining, and number two, we can actually build. We'll never get back to the bush, but we can build. And that is so exciting to me, to actually have a way forward to leave my farm in better shape for my kids than it was when I took it over. And that's something that I actually didn't think was possible. So that's one session that I think is really, really exciting. There's so many others in this.
I noticed the need for speed in corn planters. We've seen so much of the 10-mile-an-hour talk in the last year. We're going to hear that's going to be on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. The need for speed. And again, we have 3 different manufacturing companies. One is a grower that's speaking and has used that technology now for 2 years. We also have from John Deere, the young lad that drove one of the high-speed corn planters that was in the province. He planted it all, and just a really solid guy that tells it the way it is. No bull roar coming out of his mouth. If it didn't work in a particular situation, he says, here's what I had to do to make it work. And then also the Vaterstat unit, which we haven't seen in Ontario work yet, but really excited about more acres per hour, right? We're getting bigger. We got to go faster. We can't go wider. So that's a cool session.
And I see big data here, big discussion here. As data becomes so important, people want to know who owns it and what you can do with it, how you can better your bottom line.
Right, exactly. So Bob Ludwig's coming in, and he's actually the head of one of the U.S. think tanks about big data and where it's exactly going. And, a lot of farmers, you say big data, and they say, what is big data? Like, really, what is this concept? And Bob will come in, he's going to tell you what big data is, number one, and he's going to answer, can it really give all the solutions that it's hyped up? People that really believe or that sell this concept, man, it'll tell you what hybrid, at what population, at what nitrogen rate, at what depth to plant, on what day to plant. Like, good grief, what's real and what isn't? Because I think there's lots of hype. I think there's potential, but I think there's more hype than potential. And the other thing is who owns it. That's a really big issue. So Bob, I think, is the key player that can really address all those issues.
Awesome. Now, speaking of hype, this conference is always well attended, and people need to register, right? Deadline is December 22 because it's always sold out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we wish we could take more people. I'm one of the guys that really fought against limiting registration, but we just don't have more seats. And so it really becomes that we have to limit registration. By the way, We've had over 10% registration in the first week. Registration came out. We opened up the website. Within the first 7 days, more than 10% of the available space was registered. And so it is going incredibly fast. You want in, I know the deadline is December 22nd, but you want to make sure that you get in. You better register early. The one last quick note I could make on registrations is that if you missed last year, if you registered for 14 and you couldn't make it because of the snowstorm, don't forget that that registration carries forward to this year. You call in, it won't cost you anything. You just roll that registration forward, and you have to make the phone call and say, hey, I have a registration from last year to make that work. But there's not many other places where they let you roll that registration forward. So we're really doing everything we can to make this work for the grower.
Awesome. Well, Peter, January 6th and 7th. Folks, don't miss it. I think it's going to be a Donnybrook.
I think it's going to be just amazing, and I hope to see you there.